most valuable asset that a real estate agent has in their business, which is their email database. And, because what you just said, well, let me take a step back. We'll get into this. Real estate agents primarily are very transactional. They're just constantly looking for the next deal, the next deal, the next deal, the next deal. Most of which wake up, and I've done all kinds of surveys on the YouTube channel, on my Instagram, around agents that are still having to chase Zillow leads 10, 15 years in the game. They still are having to door knock. They're still having to call for sell by owners. They're still having to call expired listings. Well, why? Because if the goal of our business, I look at it very similar to building a sales practice, like a dentist does, like a chiropractor does, like a doctor does, like a CPA does, like a financial advisor does. And I think most agents that get into the business don't think about it like that. They think of it just as a transactional business because of the way in which we get paid. We sell a house and we get paid, and then we have to go sell another house and we get paid. But I am under the belief you can build a residual business model if you prioritize the database. And specifically, the foundation of the database is the email newsletter. And the thing that reminded me of this was outside of real estate, you guys, like outside of our industry, the email capture is every business's number one priority. Every internet marketer, every online and offline business, their goal is to build this database. Why? Because now they own a lead pool, if you will, that is not subject to what social media algorithms do. It's not subject to any type of, communication laws that potentially get in the way, right? People are opting into a list, and it puts you in control of your business. And this hit me just fairly recently, and most real estate agents don't prioritize building the email list the way that other entrepreneurs are. And I think they go back to regret it the same way that I did. And so I want to talk about some tactical things in just a minute, but what are your guys' thoughts on that? Just the transactional piece versus the importance of actually building leads and getting them into your world. Go ahead, Colton.
It's huge. And this is actually helps. The last thing I wanted to touch on with the Zillow piece that they mentioned in that article that relates directly to this is they've been talking about, and they touched on that article about them creating, I think they call it a super app, right?
Yes.
A super app. And, they're going to have everything, and everything's becoming corporatized, commodity. It's all like sameness. And so an agent's number one opportunity in a world of AI, in a world of commodity, is connection and relationship with their clients. And having a newsletter that provides value and going into some of the tactics that we'll talk about is huge. And it's a way to keep those relationships up at scale.
That's right.
And so I think it's a massive opportunity.
Yeah. And because you just nailed it. Because the thing is, these agents' databases are getting marketed to, just not by them.
They're
opting into other people's newsletters because the agent's not doing it, and they're getting taken like right underneath their nose, right in their backyard. And the goal, let me paint a clear vision, and then we'll kind of back into maybe some more tactical things, is for a real estate agent every year to look at the people they talk to, the clients in which they serve, as how do I give this client such an amazing experience that when I close the deal, that's when things begin, not end. That's when the relationship starts. It's not finalized at the closing table. That's how most agents think, is I closed a deal and it's over. I got paid, and that's the finish line. If you just alter that frame and you look at this business the same way, we'll call it a CPA. That's a great analogy. Okay, it's a service similar to ours where the CPA says, okay, I'm going to work with Colton Fisher. My goal is to work with Colton Fisher forever.
Yeah.
because every year he's got to do his taxes, right? Well, my goal as a real estate agent is to treat that relationship in my database the same way, where I'm managing a book of business, where every year my goal is to communicate with Colton and everybody else in my database in such a way where I'm managing a larger asset than many of these people are with their financial planners.
Yeah.
And they go see their financial planner, what, once, twice per year? That's when I meet with my guy. But people's home and their asset and their mortgage and their debt and all of that's not being reviewed. Certainly not by a mortgage loan officer, certainly not by a real estate professional. And that's what I'm suggesting, so that you can have a business that is self-sustaining. And the newsletter being the tactical thing that allows you to scale your communication in a way where you're serving all of these people on a weekly basis. Ben, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, I think if we look at it like exactly like, to give it maybe an analogy or whatnot, is thinking of it like people are crazy right now about passive income, right?
Yeah.
And do you want to do everything like you're describing from scratch every single time? We talk a lot about outbound prospecting. Whether you do Zillow leads or you do outbound prospecting, you can be transactional, right?
Yeah.
Or you can capture that and really deliver on the back end like you're talking about. And then all of a sudden the business gets easier. You don't have to do those deals forever. So it's like, look at it as like real estate. You buy a piece of real estate once, you put the money out, but then you get this cash flow continuously through. And in our business, to have a sellable business, you have to have something of value. And I believe it would be that book of business, that email list, to be able to transfer that to the next generation, whether that's a younger business partner or a child, or even be more sellable than that. That's, I think, how you could create like a legacy through your business, versus most realtors don't have retirement. They just hang it up and disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think the problem is, to be fair, why a real estate agent may be listening or watching or has thought this, certainly I have in the past, why maybe they haven't prioritized the email newsletter is because they themselves don't see the value in it. So like, oh, people don't care. Why would they open my emails? And that, I guess, leads us into, well, let's get tactical for a minute, because here's what we're talking about. I have opted into numerous email lists. And it's so funny we're talking about this, because I think later this week we're going to have a big announcement for the entire audience for our new email list for real estate agents, where we're going to share our best tactical content with that newsletter that we don't even share on YouTube. We don't share on Instagram. We don't share it anywhere else except for the people that subscribe to the email newsletter. And that sets this up perfectly. So if you're a real estate agent watching or listening to the show, consider this. Consider thinking about your email newsletter. The reason why maybe you've dismissed this, we're not talking about the templated thing from your CRM that's, cookie cutter, low value, just garbage. We're talking about a piece of content that you send out to everybody in your database every week that is so valuable that people are waiting by their computer minutes before that email drops because there's so much value. And that's the first piece of advice. When you start an email newsletter, you want to have it drop on the same day and the same time every week to train the audience so that you can start to build up that momentum. Maybe you drop it every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Maybe you drop it every Friday morning. Maybe you drop it every Monday morning. Pick it, doesn't matter. But whatever you do, pick the same day and the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start talking about, okay, well, what should I put in this thing, Brandon, Colton, Ben, guys, what do I put in this? So what are your thoughts, Colton, as far as the content goes? Because that's always the question we get.
Well, even a step before that, not only the content, but you just talked about the due date, the DUE date, when they're going to send it out. What I think agents, part of the reason they don't commit to something like this is because they don't set a due date, DO. When are you going to do it? When are you going to write it? Right? So it's always,
point.
send out a weekly email this day, this time. Like, okay, well, what's your process? How are you going to fit it into your schedule for creating it? Right. And
So
so
good.
yeah, in terms of
Just
the
like you would
content,
prospecting.
just like you would prospecting. You don't say, hey, I'm going to go to listing appointments these days of the week. It's like, well,
That's right.
that's your goal. You've got to slot it out, but you got to do the work to get there first, right?
That's right. That's a great point.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, nothing. I mean, I'm thinking about that, and you're right. It's the same thing with a lot of the systems and processes that realtors don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily because of the strategy or the tactic. It's the to your point, the doing of the thing. Whether that be making a video, writing a blog, sending an email newsletter, sending your birthday cards out to your clients. Like, I can conceptualize that, but now we have to build in time into the schedule of, okay, when are you going to sit your rear end in front of your computer and really focus on this thing? Again, because agents are so transactional minded. They're like, well, how is that going to get me a deal today, now? It's like, well, if you could think long term, you could communicate with thousands of people for free with something that is more valuable than anything else. And how do I know it's that valuable? Well, if you just look at the news, it's hard to debate otherwise. If an agent just Googles local market or whatever Tampa, Florida housing market, they're going to see headlines where hundreds of thousands of people are clicking on in their market. And they could be that person that disseminates that information. So, yeah, I think that's smart. So number one is same day, same time. Before that, when are you going to do it? When are you going to write it? And then we'll get to content. But Ben, did you want to add something to that?
No, I was just going to go on to kind of another point. When I was thinking through this for myself, it's like, man, I hate the idea of writing. I hate the idea of trying to sound like these like corporate newsletters I get. And I think what's really important to keep in mind is, one, be yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you one, I think be yourself. And then two, like have a casual style. It doesn't need to be corporate. I think it needs to be conversational, personalized. But then I had, write things that you're interested in. So if you're interested and maybe your desire is to sell more lakefront properties, then like niche down. Don't just go like huge topics, national real estate, but niche down to the point where you're talking about, okay, like in Michigan, the ice is out. This is when it's out. These are the activities we're coming into this season. This is the new boat. This is, some sailing tips, whatever. But if you have some of those things that you enjoy, you're going to attract your audience through that. And then when they meet you, you're the same person. And you guys can kind of work through that lake property, something you're passionate about, etc.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. It's like, if you're going to just do this to check a box, like you're not going to get traction. If you're writing it because you heard on some podcast that you should have a weekly email newsletter, it's not going to, the whole campaign, the whole idea won't work. You have to, it's like anything, right? What you put in is what you get out. If you have an email newsletter that's worth it, then it will serve, I think, what you want it to do. And what we want it to do is communicate value to a large population of people in the database, because that's what you want to touch them consistently. You want it to be something that people look forward to. And Ben, you just nailed it. It's like, what is going on with your local community? What are the things happening? What are the new restaurants? What are the new events? We're just coming off Memorial Weekend. What's the recap of that? What happened locally? You almost want to think of yourself as the local news anchor, and you're reporting the news, both with local community news, the housing market, real estate strategies, and then what's happening inside of these real estate transactions that you can give insights into that people don't maybe realize, to help them avoid landmines. Those are the four topics that I kind of think through when I say, okay, here's what this email newsletter is going to be about. And Ben, I think you hit it. You have to write it. Email newsletters do so much better when they come through, or they come from an authentic point of view, not a, you're not writing an essay for your high school, English class. You know what I mean? Like you're writing it in a way that's captivating the audience, and you're sharing very deep rooted, I think, content that piques people's curiosity that you think they would care about in a way that is conversational. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, really important because as you're prospecting, as you're doing, not only when you close your deal, you're going to put clients into a raving fan club aftermath, but as you're prospecting, as you're gathering email addresses, you're taking the information of these people in your community, you're putting them into a centralized location where now you control the narrative, you control the communication, and that's the goal. That's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, and I think this can, incorporate into, well, let me step back. It's not a replacement for one of the things we talk a lot about, which is like your weekly follow-up. Right. To your for sale by owners, your expireds, any deals you're trying to work through. This is just kind of in addition to, and you can even work it into that system. I think the problem is going back to what you said earlier. It's a great point. A lot of agents want to get caught up in, all right, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? And then you said like, well, don't just check a box, right? Maybe in the beginning, if I could push back on that, maybe it is important to check the dang box just to get started doing it, right? Because I think a lot of the times the reason people don't get started is because of all of the questions. Well, what platform should I use? How should I design it? How is this going to fit into that? Now over time you can either learn from somebody or kind of figure out your own system. But I think just to get started doing it and kind of incorporate it into what you already have is going to be big, because there's just so many what ifs and how to do this and how to do that. And it's just like, get the dang thing out. And then over time you could get feedback or go, they call it funnel hacking in the marketing space, right? Go email newsletter hack a couple of local agents in your market or across the country and start to model those. That's the only thing I would add to that, because they'll get stuck in creative avoidance like we talk about quite a bit.
It's a great point. And I guess, to clarify, I guess what I was saying was I think that if an agent can just, at least they can get started, but if they could stay away from that, like, okay, you sign up for CRM X, right? And they've got all these canned emails that you can send. I'm just saying, stay away from that. Just sit down for 30 minutes and write like 3 or 4 sentences about something. Because here's the thing, like, let me just, instead of telling people, let me show people. I think that's the better way to do it, right? Let me pull this up for a second, just so I can give the audience kind of what we're talking about, right? So if, like, any agent can do this at any time they want, they could just go like Nashville housing market, and they could just hit news, and they're just going to get a bunch of things to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to overthink this. You could just put, Nashville real estate news. Same thing, right? Just things that are happening that you don't even have to think through. You could put in, Nashville business news. Same thing. And say, okay, what are the top stories, right? This is 2 hours ago, 5 hours ago. Jackson named Best in Business by Nashville Business Journal. I mean, these are all things to discuss potentially in your weekly email newsletter, right? And the list goes on and on and on and on. I want to give people the confidence to just start, where it's like, I just don't know what to write about. Just Google. Go ahead, Colton.
And in addition to that, because okay, well, what should my subject line be? Or the best copywriters in the world, these news anchors, they've come up with the theme of your newsletter for you. And maybe a good way to kind of just get started is and it's kind of what we did, like from the Zillow article we talked about earlier with, or the Inman article when they talked about how Zillow, we just read some stuff on the article and we kind of put our thoughts behind it. And so literally quote the article and then put some thoughts behind it. Quote the article, put some thoughts behind it. And
That's it.
another frame to look at this through in terms of the creation and the aesthetic. And like you said, oh, should this be all branded or a canned template? Just ask yourself, if I was writing my mom an email or my fellow agent an email, how would it be formatted? What would it look like? And don't stem too far from that.
That's right. Yeah, and you just gave a really good tactical thing. We call it the DJ Khaled method, right? It's like, just take what is already there that we know the audience likes and remix it.
Yeah.
What's your take on the new restaurant that just opened? What was your experience with the new coffee shop that just opened? What's your take on home sales being down 23% in Tampa, Florida? What's your take on it? What's your take on people moving out of this area into this area, the top neighborhoods, the worst neighborhoods, this price point, just what is your take on it? Because there's no right or wrong. That's what's so great about journalism. There's not a right point of view. It's just your point of view. That's what makes you unique to your own content. Anything else to add there?
No, I think it's phenomenal.